Hi, I'm Tamara Lee, the editor of Blackout Magazine, and this is your Blackout Report. So, Blackout has really been focusing on coming to you with all of the bills and executive orders that specifically target the Black and LGBTQ community because there's so much going on. We want you to have one source to be able to come to know, okay, this is about to hit me and my neighborhood and my community and my friends and family and affect my life. However, what we're going to talk about today is the SAVE Act, but it is incredibly important and it will affect you, but it could also affect millions and millions and millions of other Americans that aren't even LGBTQ. So, this is the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act is basically a bill to reform voter registration, the voting process, and it's one of our fundamental constitutional rights as Americans is to be able to cast our vote. There has been voter tampering, there has been voter suppression, there has been gerrymandering, and all of the things that have gotten in the way of folks voting already. This bill supposedly is supposed to target non-Americans being able to vote. So it is masked as this voter reform bill to improve the voting system, to stop immigrants and undocumented folks from voting. However, there has been massive study and there's been no evidence of that being a thing. It is already a law that if you're not an American citizen that you can't vote here. There are many American citizens who no longer can vote here because of felony convictions, so certainly extra people can't. However, that's the way that they're sort of, the Republicans, the GOP are sort of framing this bill. Once again, preying on fear and misinformation to be able to push these bills through. So the crux of the SAVE Act is that you will no longer be able to register online. You will no longer be able to show a license, identification to register to vote. You now have to have secondary proof. So what is that secondary proof? It can't be military ID. It cannot be your license. It cannot be a tribal ID, which is crazy because that disenfranchises the entire indigenous community just about. And that's an ID that is accepted across the board. You have to have a birth certificate with the name that's on your birth certificate as written that appears on your secondary ID. The only things that will be accepted to demonstrate that is your birth certificate, your marriage documents potentially, because it's still in question whether those will even be accepted, and it may go down to specific jurisdictions deciding that, which means it will not be consistent, and it's not necessarily the way that it will pan out, and also how long, even if it's written in initially, and passport documents. So this means that 69 million people who have taken their spouse's name, 69 million women that have taken their spouse's name through marriage may not be able to vote because their birth name will not match the ID that they have. Their last names have changed. Trans folks who have changed their last name, have changed their first name, who have just changed their first name and not touched their last name, it will certainly affect their ability to vote and having IDs that match from their birth to adulthood. Queer married couples who may have changed their last name, and really anyone who has changed their last name for any reason. If your name doesn't exactly match your current ID to your birth certificate, you may not be able to vote. Okay, well, you can use secondary forms of ID, right? So we said birth certificates, potentially marriage documents, and passports. All of those things cost money. Birth certificates usually cost $40 now because you need a stamped copy. Passports cost over $200 for your very first one because you have to pay for the pictures. You have to pay for the fees from wherever you get them from, even if you go to the passport office, and you have to pay for the passport itself. Marriage documents. If you no longer have your marriage documents, if you got married a long, long time ago and they weren't provided or maintained records the way that they do now, can you even access them? So potentially millions and millions and millions of women, queer folks, trans folks, and people across the country could be eliminated from the ability to register to vote. This is scary stuff, and we need to be paying attention. The bill passed the House on April 10th. Just in case you wondered, all the Republicans voted for it, and 4 Dems crossed lines to vote for it also. Ed Case in Hawaii, Henry Cuellar of Texas, Jerry Golden of Maine, and Marie Kuzenkamp Perez of Washington State all crossed lines to vote with the Republicans. It will now move into the Senate. In the Senate, the Republicans control the Senate 53 seats to 47 seats, which means they have the majority. They have the majority in all of the houses at this point. However, 7 Democrats will have to cross over lines to vote for this, or they can block it. They can filibuster it. Call your senators. Let them know this isn't acceptable. Even if the senators in your district are Republican, tell them anyway. We have seen time and time again that these calls, every single one of those calls, every single one of those emails has to be recorded, make a difference. The public pressure makes a difference. And certainly, if you have Democratic senators in your area, call them and let them know that you want them to vote this down. They have to vote no. Having these extra fees associated and extra hoops to jump through to be able to vote is, one, illegal. Two, it's not what the Constitution promises. Three, it's basically creating poll taxes, which were a thing back in the day that were used so Black folks could not vote. When they say you need to vote because this is what our ancestors stood up for, this is one of those times. So we wanted to make sure that we could break it down for you so you understood what's happening. There's rumors that these things aren't true, that that's not what this bill says. That is what this bill says. Make sure you're contacting your senators to let them know, vote this down, no SAVE Act. We need to maintain the ability to have representation and to have our voices heard at every chance that we can, because they're already suppressing it illegally, so we can't allow them to make that legal.